So, hello and welcome to the Alphagenix podcast, where we discuss all things men's health and testosterone. I'm Dr. Max, lead clinician at Alphagenix, and today I'm joined by Dr. James Brunning. We met at the Health Optimization Summit and had a good chat about, well, a variety of things, really. As a background, he is a consultant anaesthetist in the NHS, working at the Royal Orthopaedic Hospital in Birmingham. But interestingly as well, he's also a qualified hypnosis practitioner and mainly focused around breathwork instructor and other sort of holistic mechanisms within medical care and health optimization. So welcome, Dr. Brunning, or James. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure. I mean, when we met at the summit, we had a bit of a chat about the links between modern medicine but also maybe we'll call it alternative medicine. But it might be interesting to know your story about how you got into this, because it's not common maybe it is. I've been out of the hospital medicine now for a while, but an anaesthetist who also practices in this other field as well. How did you get involved in it? What was the inspiration?
A bit of a journey, I suppose, in some senses. I mean, yeah, I've been an anaesthetist since 2005. So effectively, I've been helping people to breathe or breathe for them for a while. I started a meditation practice in 2011, 2012, and then started doing some breath work through other people, probably sort of 16, 17. And then I've always been interested in hypnosis and did a qualification in that in 2019-20. I've been running conferences with an emphasis on wellness together with my wife. And as part of that, we have done things like ice baths and breath work. And just having had some sort of quite profound experiences during the breath work, that was something that really interested me. And then the year before the Health Optimization Summit, we went just as delegates to have a look. And there was a Soma breathwork session there, and I did that and was just blown away and felt incredible, felt amazing, and thought I'd like to have a little bit more of that in my life. So I entered their training, and for me, the Soma breathwork sort of combines music, sort of hypnotic intention setting, and the breathwork. And those combined, I find really quite powerful. So I went from there, and yeah, having done courses where we've got people in to do the ice bath and breath work, it's something now that I feel confident I can take people through, and it's helped me in my practices. So I try and have cold in some form most days, and the breath can really help you make that a little bit less unpleasant, and give you the good results afterwards as well.
Yeah. What was the inspiration behind going? Because you mentioned, was the first step, was it meditation stuff? Was it personal meditation work that you were doing? Was it help manage? Because I imagine as a consultant anaesthetist in hospital medicine, it's not the most unstressful job, perhaps at times. You know, was it something you did to first of all cope well? Because certainly meditation was something I got into, I think it was about 5 years ago, I think. And like you said, you can have real moments of inspiration, can be pretty life-changing. And what was the inspiration at the beginning of the journey for you?
Amazingly, given their reputation in some senses, and I don't think this is unfair to them as a whole, it was an orthopedic surgeon who mentioned to me that he was doing meditation. And so I started sort of doing headspace sporadically, found it really difficult, as most people do, I think, and still do. I think now, for me, breath work is very, very similar to meditation in the sense that you often don't think of anything else because you're concentrating on one thing in general. And I think slowly, I don't know how you found it, I'll be interested to hear, but for me, meditation, I think you do get some benefit immediately, but that I think compounds with the consistency, and 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, you just gently notice your background anxiety drifts down, and things that were bothering you before perhaps don't. I mean, clearly we all still fly off the handle at things that we shouldn't do from moment to moment. But I think it has helped me at work, and it's helped me in my private life as well. But that's how it was for me. How was it for you?
Yeah, it was indeed. It was when I started when I had low testosterone and not realizing that was the underlying issue. And I've spoken before about it. A lot of my symptoms were kind of anxiety and poor stress resilience, really, in hindsight. And so meditation, I always say this, was like, it gave me a break, and it also seemed to kind of almost reset the day. that was my mechanism for trying to reset the day and get going again, almost in a sense. Also used it for pre-sleep and things like that. It seemed to help with sleep. But like you said, what's interesting about it, it's almost like going to the gym, because you gradually get better at it as well. Because when you start, it's very much so something that you have to be practiced in. You know, people assume they're going to start meditating and then all of a sudden become like, you know, Gandhi and just be like, you know, completely chill. But actually, you have to train your mind, don't you, really, to it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that the reality is stress causes so many problems for all of us. It causes obesity, it causes diabetes, metabolic syndrome, poor sleep, all of these things. Hypertension, which is always hypertension. And I think we're not, as animals that we're not designed for the modern world. Well, the modern world isn't designed around our physiology. And so meditation and breath work, I think, can give you tools to perform optimally. And that, I think, for me is one of the joys of it, but actually enjoying life in general more, because you're not just in that state of stress and frazzled and anxiety that I don't think is natural, but has become a constant companion for most people these days, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of, as we've become almost technologically advanced, we've removed ourselves from our natural state. And then I even say, since I've changed jobs from being in general practice, driving to and from work, the idea of being sat down for prolonged periods of time, being sat at a desk with my job in the past as well. There's so many things that's almost kind of like, it sounds stupid, but it's unnatural for our bodies. And I think, like you said, that's sort of, it's learning how to rest and relax, I think, appropriately, and giving your mind a break. And these things don't help as well, do they, either? That's a phone in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think you mentioned doing it through the day, but for me, I think doing it first thing that you mentioned, it sort of resets the day, and it sets the day. If you wake up and reach your phone and you're straight on your emails or something, you're just fired off, and you're not making the most of that day. Whereas if you can find time and make time to meditate, it sort of sets you up for the day, a bit like if you exercise or do some cold or whatever, and then the rest of the day you've got a little win in the back of your head, you've got a little tick, and things just tend to unfold better, or your reactions to how things unfold are improved, I would say. So I'm the same. I actually do have my phone in the room. I try hard not to, but I think your sleep is better if it's not in the room. And they're designed by incredibly intelligent people with algorithms that are way more powerful than our brains to get us addicted, and they do it brilliantly.
Yeah, they plug into our animal brains, I think, is what they're doing, which is the guy that often flies off the handle when we are stressed as well. I remember reading the book called the Chimp Paradox, and I've mentioned it before. I don't know why I'm obsessed with this book, and it's a similar concept with a lot of meditation, even CBT work, is this idea that you're trying to remove yourself from those unhelpful thoughts as well, aren't you? So it gives you that, or it tries to give you that gap between silly, unhelpful thoughts, perhaps that just exacerbate the stress, exacerbate the anxiety. You're one step removed. And so, like you said, you can kind of go about your day in more of a relaxed manner, more of a logical state, I guess is a way to look at it. That's certainly what I found with it, was the fact that it did give me a step or two between, what was quite regular unhelpful thought patterns that seem to be related to this hormonal issue. It just gave me that gap, and that helps you deal with everything a little bit more calmly and effectively. Yeah.
I mean, I think the interesting thing is, most of us try and get around the problems that we've created in our own head by thinking about the problems that we've created in our own head. And actually, I think there's more and more Western medicine, sort of in inverted commas, appreciating the mind-body connection, and the gut microbiome is increasingly being researched, and the importance of that, and the importance of diet and what you put in. And I think what we don't perhaps realize or aren't taught is the sort of the vagus nerve, the big one. It's 80% is your body telling your brain what to do, rather than your brain telling your body what to do. So the breath, I think, is so powerful, because we can tell our body consciously to tell our brain to calm down and to relax, and you can change your state quite powerfully, quite quickly. And with people with anxiety, which is a massive problem in kids and my children and various things, you can see when someone is likely to have a panic attack by how they are breathing, because they start to breathe more quickly and they breathe through their chest, and you can predict that when that's going to happen. So if you train them how to deal with to breathe more effectively and efficiently, then their background anxiety goes down. They're more in the sort of parasympathetic rest and digest. Similarly with things like IBS, if you do a bit of breath work, simple breathing techniques before you eat, you can massively improve your IBS symptoms. So we just exist in this hyper stress state that doesn't help us to perform optimally. We need it on occasions, but most of the time we really don't, actually. And learning how to breathe slowly, nasally, diaphragmatically on a regular basis, and even running and doing loads of exercise using nasal breathing whilst uncomfortable and unpleasant at first on many levels, gives you better performance. The irony is when we breathe through our nose, we get 20% better delivery of oxygen to our tissues. So it's going to help our performance. So there's so many things that we can improve. There's loads of sort of exercise science and data out there that proves all of this. And we're designed to breathe through our nose, essentially, both at night and in the daytime. But habitual patterns are difficult to break. So I think approaching yourself with some compassion and realizing you've done this all your life, it's going to take a while to get through it. But if you start to work at breathing nasally while you're running, you start to do a bit of gentle breath work before you eat, just to sort of put yourself in the rest and digest, will all help you to absorb the nutrients, hopefully from good non-processed food, and help your performance on a daily basis.
Yeah, you're talking my language there. Good non-processed food. That's one of my rules, is this concept that you've got to watch what you put in your body as well as what you do with your body as well. And I think sometimes we can almost get hyper obsessed with one area, let's say the breath work and the meditation, or we'll get hyper obsessed with exercise. But really, to get the best results, or you get hyper obsessed with diet, but you've got to combine the whole picture, haven't you? That's really where you get that big difference out at the end, really. And like you said, it's not a quick fix. It's not, you start eating healthily one day, you're not going to all of a sudden be an athlete the next. You've got to, or you're not going to drop 50 pounds in a week, but it's a steady, consistent process. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, I think you're right. You need to it's helpful to get the basics right in all of the areas of life, of sleep, of nutrition, of exercise, and just stick with those. And then you're going to be able to improve on the ones that perhaps are more fun or that you enjoy or appeal to you. I mean, ultra processed food it's everywhere, isn't it? And we live in an obesogenic environment. I'm moving towards and believe now that it isn't people's fault that they are obese, but it's the environment. However, they can do something about it. However, it's not easy. I mean, the data is incredible. If it's something like for every 10% of your diet that's composed of ultra processed food, your all-cause mortality, so your chance of dying of everything, goes up by 15%. So, and the diet we feed our kids, and I'm as guilty as a lot of people, is sort of 50-60% of UPF. It's astonishing. Other interesting random facts with obesity: if you're cesarean born and bottle fed, your chances of being obese go up. So sort of a quadrant of vaginal birth versus cesarean and breast versus bottle. Now that isn't in your control. That was just something that happened and might have needed to happen. However, it does have an impact on you for the rest of your life, potentially. It isn't you can't get round, but it's there as well. So it's so nuanced, all of this stuff. But yeah, you're right. Just try and hit the basics on most things. And a lot of things, anxiety may slip away, your consistency will go up, your sleep will improve. Therefore, you've got more energy to do everything else you want to do in life. Yeah.
You get into a positive spiral rather than negative spiral, because what you'll often see is a lot of people who maybe are struggling with, you'll see this all the time in your job, I imagine, with your colleagues and things in hospital medicine. It's kind of, you get into a stressed position. And so, you develop a little bit of anxiety, your stress is pumping, you end up making bad food choices, your sleep deteriorates, you might hit the drink a little bit more than perhaps you should. And that, all of it is like a vicious cycle in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
But quite rightly, is if you start making those changes, remember how long maybe it took you to get to a bad place. That's what I say to a lot of my chaps who have, low testosterone. It's how quickly will it work if you went on testosterone treatment?
Yeah.
Well, how long have you had low testosterone for? How long have you, all of these changes physiologically and psychologically happen. Well, it's not going to be overnight. Yeah. And that's about reversing that negative spiral that people can get into. How is it for you in terms of with the I was going to say anaesthetics job? Is that being the anaesthetist? How much do you see stress issues around your colleagues and things? Because everyone always talks about how stressed the NHS is or how stretched it is. Yeah. And you mentioned before offline about offering support. Is it conferences or get together for support doctors? That sort of work as well.
Yeah,
it's the NHS. Yeah, tell me about that.
I think men's health in general is tricky. I think that the level of suicide, I've had 2 or 3 people I know sadly die by completed suicide, 2 or 3 of whom have been anaesthetists, and that hits hard. I think you can see it, and you do see it in colleagues. I think it's about trying to be aware of it and then just ask that extra second time, are you sure you're all right? It's hard, isn't it, dealing with people? It's hard dealing with yourself when you're stressed. It's also hard dealing with other people. But I think offering those options and offering to give people a little break or just little chats around the coffee table or whatever do help. We have noticed, clearly, I think COVID infected everyone hugely. So the conferences we run, we have great feedback about. Some of them are residential, and the biggest thing is just realizing that other people are in the same boat, and we all have the same problems, and we all have the same issues, and that there's some sort of camaraderie about being in it together, and that's the same regardless of your job. It's not. I don't think that's unique to medicine. I think there are some things that are more stressful in medicine that don't necessarily go through with every job, but most jobs are tricky, and I think the people who are often the most stressed are the people who have the least in society. So it's not something that just sits with medicine. But yeah, I think there is a bit more interest in it and around it. I think COVID gave people an opportunity to look at their lives slightly differently and to realise that perhaps there is more than one form of wealth. There's sort of physical wealth, emotional wealth, all of those things. A random fact I love is that they did a study on German men, and if you kiss your wife in a sort of passionate way when you leave the house, you have 2 or 3 years longer on your life. Like the quality of our relationships just plays into how our life goes out. And I think that the Framingham study as well, the sort of following up of American people for years on years, just demonstrates the power of relationships in our life. That isn't easy in lots of careers where you're moving around and you're doing shift work and all of that. And that's something that I think a lot of medics struggle with, and I do, trying to maintain close relationships and friends and all of that is hard. And I think, in the men's sphere, I think definitely trying to be open, talk more, and admit when you're struggling, I think is vital. But it isn't easy to do because it's not how we are generally brought up and encouraged. And I think the banter down the pub of just taking the mick out of each other is brilliant and powerful. There are times when it needs to go beyond that as well. And I think learning to offer that and to ask for that, I think is really important. It's such a waste when people are lost to suicide, I think.
Yeah, that's horrendous, isn't it? Yeah. How did do you think COVID did open people up a little bit? Because we know the statistics about the risk factors for sort of getting poorly from COVID or dying from COVID. Sort of a lot of lifestyle factors were in there: obesity, type 2 diabetes. Obviously, you can't control getting older as such, but do you think that opened people up a lot to the fact that, or maybe it hyper-emphasized the fact that so much of your health is in your own hands, rather than what I used to always frustrate me a little bit in general practice was that people expected there to be a pill at the end of the consultation that would fix, this, that, or the other. And it's kind of, well, let's take a step back. And like we've been talking about, are we exercising? What are we putting in our mouths every day? How are we sleeping? How are we coping with stress? I mean, it's not quick and easy, but I think COVID maybe did highlight a little bit about how significant all of that is based on, data of risk factors and things. I think it kind of highlighted that a little bit more to the average day-to-day guy who doesn't fixate too much on their own health. And we all get into bad habits as well, don't we? So I think it highlights that a little bit more to maybe a wider audience, perhaps.
Yeah, I think so. I think I'm a sort of cynical optimist, but I think generally, yes, it did. But then it's hard to dissociate your own beliefs that changed over that time from everyone else's and your sort of echo chambers that you quite naturally live in. But my belief is I think it did a bit. And then I suppose off the back of that, with everything, once you hear the information and are aware of it, is whether or not you're able to make that stick and get that going in your life in a consistent manner. I think we're lucky in the world we live in at the moment. There's so many podcasts and there's so much information and things that are out there that are free that you can use to improve your life. You don't need money to improve it. You need time to a degree, but I think if you want to change, the information and the knowledge is out there. You just have to try and do the actions off the back of it. So I do believe that some people had some good change. It's probably like most things, 25% of people change things in the right direction, 50% a little bit here or there, and then 25% just carried on in the other way. I think for me, it's always direction of travel. I try to, we mentioned earlier about anxiety in patients. It always astounds me when I see patients who are they're on beta blockers to slow their heart rate down for anxiety. And I said, has anyone talked to you about breathing? And no one's mentioned it before. Now, I say that with some sort of compassion, and GP is a hard job, really hard. But there's so many things out there that people can do for themselves that will probably have more profound impact. And it's, you think you're taking a pill, but that isn't going to get rid of the cause of the anxiety. It's going to take the edge off the symptoms, hopefully, for a period of time. But then what are we going to do within that to remove or change or alter the course of things in your life? I suppose you just have to hope that people do learn the lessons that come along to them in life, and that we learn them ourselves, and try and just keep the direction of travel. That positive spiral that you talk about, I think, is vital, actually. And you're right, you can see it in yourself and you see it in other people, and then just acknowledge that, okay, I've dropped off, let's try and get back on course and move in the right direction. For my family, COVID, I think, did have a big impact in moving in the right direction. I appreciate lots of people suffered and lots of people struggled in ways that we didn't have to, and I'm aware of that. But my feeling is it did push people a bit more this way, because it massively disrupted society and how we interacted on a day-to-day basis for a good period of time. I don't know, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think it probably shifted the needle a little bit for several people. I think, sadly, is the message wider accepted? I think there's a degree of perhaps people who just don't fixate on, if I say fixate as if it's a negative, but healthy habits, etc. They're not that widely taken up. I think it made a bit of a difference. So I do think that, it did spread the word a little bit. Certainly when started people looking at alternative therapies, even things like vitamin D supplementation, zinc, magnesium, vitamin C. I think it highlighted to people there are other methods out there to, either get better from an illness like a virus, but also actually avoid getting properly sick in the first place. I think it did spread it a little bit. I think, like you, though, I probably live in a bit of an echo chamber. Generally, my patients are pretty well versed in the world of health optimization. Not all of them, but quite a few of them are. Like a lot of them already are weight training. A lot of them are already, looked at the diet. And sometimes that is self-selecting, because some of these guys have felt like rubbish for a prolonged period. So they've already gone down the route of, can I fix this? Can I fix this? Can I fix this? And then, lo and behold, the hormonal issue was always underlying it. And the other stuff did help, but it never really fixed it. So I think some of that is a bit self-selecting biased, I guess, from people I meet and speak to. And obviously doing this podcast as well, most people are pretty well versed in this area. So I am aware that maybe I do live in a bit of an echo chamber now. But the crazy thing is with general practice, for sure, is, like you said, it's a tough job. My wife's still in general practice. And a lot of it is about, do you really have the time to delve into, exactly like you said, breath work, meditation, exercise habits, diet, even things as simple as high protein, getting your fruit and veg in, avoiding processed food. I mean, that takes time. And if your appointments are let's say 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes. In real time, that's more like 8 minutes by the time you get the appointment started. It's difficult. I don't envy the work that I look back now and think my appointments are now half an hour. And sometimes I run over the hour appointment for a new guy. And so it's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. Plus, I think part of the problem as well in general practice, for example, is, and I don't know how you found this going through med school and through training and things, do we get taught this stuff very much? You know, I'm not sure how much we go into diet, exercise, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I don't think at the time. It was mentioned with just some random sort of missing enzyme deficiencies in people that are rare as hen's teeth and come up in childhood. Generally, no. I think that's more sort of self-interest as time goes on and you look at it that way. I don't know how it is now normally things lag sort of 20 years behind, don't they? That's the general scenario. So in 20 years, we'll talk about the gut microbiome will be taught and the importance of nutrition. It's things like, I love the SMILES trial in depression, where you give people a Mediterranean diet and it's as effective as antidepressants. And I think they've done stuff in prisons where they gave the prisoners sort of reasonable food instead of just slop, and violence went down because they were better people, quite literally, because as you say, it's the building blocks of everything that comes. I think the answer to that is no. The power of exercise, I heard the other day that exercise isn't an antidepressant, but not exercising depresses you. And it's sort of that other way around. We're built to move, we're made to move, we are animals. But again, modern life, and it's astonishing, it's something like 20% of people are classed as inactive, which is they walk for less than half an hour a week. So a decent proportion of the population is and again, some of that through education, through its lack of understanding, but actually it's evolutionary as well. We're built to conserve energy, and we're built to have stores in case of famine. So we're designed to put on fat and to be lazy. So we can't sort of flagellate ourselves and beat ourselves up about the fact that we've evolutionary been chosen to be like that. So it's being aware of it and doing something about it. Again, they're two separate things, aren't they? I think knowledge is great to, I think like most people, I just fill my head up with knowledge and then not do as much as would be beneficial, but it's there. Yeah. If we all did a reasonable amount of exercise, the majority of Western lifestyle diseases would go away, combined with eating food. And it's astonishing, really. But then there are powerful market forces and profit things that are in place and have to be like that, because that's the requirement of a company, is to make money. They've got a statutory duty to give their shareholders returns. So it's complex, isn't it? And
yes, the rock and the hard place with free markets, capitalism, it does create good and some bad. Yeah. You mentioned before about we talked about lifestyle there, and what about this? You talking about pre-operation, pre-surgery health optimization that you're doing with your patients coming in. What does that revolve around, and how does that tend to fashion out in reality? Yeah.
So the patients, most of them come in for sort of knee or hip replacements, and they do get some education on and around diet and exercise. There's some really good websites out there. There's something called Moving Medicine that if you put in, I've got a shoulder problem, it will give you some exercises you can do. Or if you've got a knee or a hip issue, it will give you things that you can do. I think there's increasing awareness that getting people fit for surgery gives you better outcomes. And this has been going on for decades. Sort of, there's a guy called Henrik Kellett who did enhanced recovery after surgery, so getting people up and going as quickly as possible, and that was in the late 90s, I think, and demonstrated really good outcomes. And it's gone from there, and now just making sure that people's diabetes is well controlled, that they're not anemic, they've got enough red blood cells, they cut down their alcohol and preferably have zero alcohol in the 2 weeks beforehand, they up their exercise. There's some really interesting stuff with sort of vascular surgery. So people who are having abdominal aortic aneurysms and things, you can plot out their expected life expectancy from their age and their comorbidities. And then you'll see that when they have an operation, their chance of dying in the next couple of years goes up. because when we operate on people, a small proportion of those will die. And then at a certain point in the future, that line crosses over again. So they'll get the benefit from having that operation, but only in a few years, or they accept the risk of their abdominal aneurysm getting slightly bigger and then bursting at some point. Now, no one has a crystal ball, but we know that if you exercise, you're going to do better. If you train your lungs, you're going to do better. If you eat good food and you've got the building blocks ready to replace all the tissues that have been injured, you're going to do better. So again, and particularly in elderly patients actually who are frail, there's good evidence coming out of various places in London that if you put the time in to check their medicines are correct, and they give them some exercises to build them up a bit before they then get that hit of surgery and they're less active for a bit, it pays back in itself. But setting up these processes are complex, time consuming and difficult. So yeah, I mean, we do give people information. In some senses, I'd love it to be a lot better and more holistic than it is. It's sort of doing that within the confines of what's available in the NHS. But I mean, again, there's so much out there that people can do. It's just giving people that information and allowing them to take the impetus from there, really. But yeah, there's loads. There's so much you can do to get people ready for surgery and then hopefully fly through, because that's what we want. We want people to do well.
Yeah. And again, it's that issue with supply and demand. You've got to reach the demand, and so the time you'd want is not always necessarily gonna be there. But like you say, if you give them the information, at least you can feel that you've tried your best, almost in a sense, isn't it? That's sometimes the case, isn't it? Because like we said, when you speak to someone and then, it's like they go away, let's say you're going to review them in a different setting, not maybe pre-op, but in terms of you're going to review them in 6 weeks or something like that. Well, there's that 6 weeks there that really the person who's got to be hitting the targets is them. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. So there always has to be that autonomy behind it as well. You just hope that your information inspires a change in the positive direction. Yeah. Do supplements come into your work at all? Sort of vitamins, say for example, D3 or, any of those?
Yeah, it does a bit. So there's a couple of surgeons who we have endless sort of well-being and health optimization conversations. Yeah. There's a surgeon who, I mean, very much stopping smoking is vital, particularly when you're operating on little bones or spines and things. Some surgeons won't operate if you're smoking because the chance of infection is high and higher, because obviously you're not obviously, but the carbon monoxide stops oxygen delivery to the bones to heal, and they're not well perfused, well supplied with blood. So, and again, if they're diabetic and their diabetic control's not good, then they're more likely to have an infection. So yeah, there is some supplementation in terms of vitamin C, vitamin D. I can't remember what else. I mean, just improving people's diet can make a massive difference. Yeah. And certainly as you get older, your protein ability to take on board protein decreases. So in your sort of 50s, 60s, 70s, having more protein probably becomes important, a bit like resistance training from 30s onwards becomes important. Otherwise, you start to move towards the frailty that is not a good way to end your life. I mean, there's that concept called health span, which I think we were talking about a bit beforehand. So most people will have a period of at least a couple of years of ill health before they die, unfortunately. But in the UK, sort of a lot of people are having 10, 15 years of ill health that is impacting on their daily life. And so what you want to try and do is have your health span as close to your lifespan as possible. And all of the things about the blue zones and social connection, exercise, resistance training, all of those things, and your basics that you mentioned come into play there. And I think that's what we're trying to get across to patients and to colleagues and friends, is that to try and live your life as best you can and enjoy it for as long as possible. There's cost and benefit to everything, isn't there, in life, I think, and it's just being aware of those things and weighing them up and then coming to the decision that you're comfortable with. But yeah, sort of vitamin C, one surgeon in particular loves is vitamin C. There's another vitamin I can't remember. And I think vitamin D for most people in the northern hemisphere is probably useful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. Anabolic resistance, isn't it? That's the irony of the Western world, is that people as they get older tend to actually eat less protein, whereas the reverse should be true. They do less exercise, whereas the reverse should be true, because it's harder to put on, but particularly it's harder to keep muscle as we get older, and muscle is so important for health span. With one of the co-owner, the other host of the Alphagenix podcast, Ross, always says I want to live till I'm 140, me, or, you know, well, it keeps getting older. So it was 120. I think now it's 140 or 150. My answer is give me 80. If exactly like if it's health span good, then I'm happy with that. But his age just keeps going up and up and up. So I presume he wants to be healthy the whole time. He doesn't want to just drag out a 20 years period at the end. But yeah.
Yeah, I think certainly working in medicine, most people realise that there are fates worse than death, and that is individual, highly individual for everyone. But you sort of, in intensive care, you talk about a good death, bad death, a good survival and a bad survival, and obviously that's layered with various cultural and personal beliefs, but all of those things come into play. But yeah, I mean, I think the muscle there's a lady called Gabrielle Lyon. Have you come across her?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, really useful. I mean, muscle is a massive metabolic sink. So you put some muscle on, then your sugar control's better. But similarly, things like sleeping. If you sleep well, your sugar, you don't crave sugar and you process sugars better. So I think lots of people probably actually one of the mainstays of health, I think, is most people know this, but sleep. And that's probably one of the keystone habits. If you get your sleep right, then so many other things follow downstream from that, because you'll have the motivation, you'll have the consistency, you're likely to be doing other things better, and you don't crave sugary processed shit. And if you do eat it, you'll process it better. I mean, it's all, most things are interlinked in life, aren't they? But yeah, I like her stuff, and she's got some very good messages, I think.
Yeah, it's crazy that it often goes back to the basics. You know, it's kind of like you rightly pointed out, most Western world diseases would be, well, significantly reduced or at least significantly delayed by a long while if people looked at the basics of diet, exercise, sleep. Yeah, like you said, exactly. Sleep is key. My oldest brother, who's now a PT, but also kind of looked into this whole wellness thing for a good while. He's actually he works on TV, but actually he's kind of going into more the sports nutrition, that sort of side of the world. And his number one thing is he always bangs on about sleep, because he's worked, like yourself, probably shift work for a long time. And he says his number one aim is to get a good night's sleep, because it just sets up everything else for the rest of the day. 100%. Yeah.
I think you learn these lessons. Sort of, I used to take pride in sort of doing a night shift and then not going to bed, which is just absolute lunacy. But I think you learn as you age how much these things impact you, and that you can't. There are certain things in life that you can't fight, and the reality is your cognition's worse, your emotional processing worse, your sugar processing worse, all of these things. And if you're getting up early so you can go for a run because you're driving yourself through sort of flagellation or lack of self-esteem or all the other things, you're like stepping over 50-pound notes to pick up pound coins. It's just, I think, get that right, and then I think increasingly trying to treat yourself as well and kindly as possible. Most of us, or a lot of us, I think, drive ourselves and thrash ourselves through the first however 20, 30, 40 years of life, and then realize that actually there are other ways of motivating yourself other than sort of beating yourself up and thinking that you're not good enough. And I think, that goes along with male mental health, I think, about sort of realizing that being your own best cheerleader type thing, whilst cheesy and a bit ick, is probably really important. The language you use to yourself and of yourself is important, actually, and can give you a much more enjoyable day-to-day existence, if nothing else.
Yeah, 100%. It's a weird state of affairs where a lot of our internal voice and things can be quite unpleasant to ourselves, and then you have to take a step back and think, actually, am I like that, or am I doing okay? And then you kind of sort of try and logically debate it. Yeah, it's quite interesting. I think most of us have that. So where do people find you at the minute? Because you mentioned you get a website developed. You've got, is it through, you're not great at social media, rather like myself as well, we were saying. How do people find you?
Yeah, I'm in the process of sort of developing that side of life and moving out. So yes, I have a website under development. I do have an Instagram account, which I'll send you the link for. It's breath_Dr_James_Brunning, but there's literally nothing on there, but hopefully there will be through time. You can contact me through the Soma Breath website, and I'll give you a link to put on the show notes as well for stuff like that. And I mean, there's so much free stuff out there. So there's Breathe with Sandy, there's various things on YouTube that I can send you through, and various easy practices to help with the cold, to help with your nutrition, just to help with enjoying life on a day-to-day basis. I think if you get up and do 5 minutes of breath work, as you said with your meditation, it just, the day becomes better and you perform better, and it's just an increased enjoyment of life. So yeah, I'm hoping to sort of develop the website and that side of life going forward. I'm just trying to be kind to myself and accept that it's a slow process and a learning process as well. It's just, I don't know. How's it been for you sort of moving into non-NHS work?
Pretty good. Yeah. I try not to rub it into my, with my wife too much, because she's still in the NHS GP land. I think the biggest thing is having, dictating a little bit more about my own time and my own schedule. Like we were saying offline beforehand, is the social media stuff is not something I'm very strong on. IT is not my strong point, but certainly I like just sitting down and whether it's on a Zoom call or a phone call, chatting to guys and having that time really just to delve into each area of health, rather than, you know, potentially a lot of clinics out there dealing with TRT, for example. It's very much so like, right, well, your level's this, here you go, we'll see you again in this time. Whereas we kind of like to be kind of very holistic in the approach, which is why we wanted you to come on as well, because talking about the breath work and meditation and all of that sort of side of it is something that we try and approach with guys, particularly when they're dealing with stressful periods. Because if there's one equalizer, you can have loads of testosterone in your blood, but if you're stressed out beyond belief, you're still not going to feel great, you know. Yeah. And that's the truth with most conditions and most treatments, really. There's always a limitation.
Yeah. Sorry, I was going to ask how much stress impacted testosterone and things like that. I'm curious as to.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything we've spoken about really can impact natural production of testosterone. So sleep deprivation, there's studies on depriving men of sleep for a week and it knocked it down. I think it was 15%, I believe. And that's just in 1 week. And that wasn't deprived of no sleep. That was down to 5 hours a night, I think. Chronic stress, basically obesity, visceral body fat, anything that causes more of a physiological stress response will impact your sex hormone production. Yeah. And anything that causes inflammation, so whether that be visceral body fat, whether that be chronic disease, it basically disturbs how well our brain signals our balls to do their job. That's an easy way to think about it. So, but everything, you know, it's kind of like, how do you maintain healthy hormones? All being well, health-wise, it's everything we've spoken about. It's managing stress, diet, exercise, sleep. It's all kind of the mainstays of everything, every other condition, basically. Yeah, it's kind of as simple as that, but doesn't always work out like that in reality. Yeah,
no, nuanced within it, isn't it? I think people are individual, aren't they? And that's what are the biggest wins you get for people that sort of make you go, yeah, that's great?
6 weeks in, some people already say that it's changed their life, to be honest. I mean, that's, you know, it's always trying to be realistic with timescales as well. So like we said before, it's kind of like, if you've had low testosterone for a good while, it's not necessarily going to be the case that within weeks you're going to see a huge difference. But sometimes guys will come back to me after 6 weeks and say they've got less anxiety, better emotional control, better stress resilience, better mood, sleep consumption, you know. So that's the feedback that we love, because it can be, well, I'm case in point, it can be life-changing, really. And
ironically, the testosterone gives you better emotional control.
Yeah, I mean, it's ironic, isn't it, that you know, the myths about testosterone tend to be the reverse is true, kind of like the heart disease myth. But yeah, so low testosterone tends to lead to poor stress resilience and irritability. Yeah. So, and it's all to do with kind of, it sounds sort of weird, but to say it's kind of balancing your stress hormones versus your sex hormones in a sense, because cortisol and testosterone are kind of reversed in their role. So if you have an imbalance, so if you've got low testosterone, then your cortisol is, I think it's an easy way to think about it, it's got nothing to buffer it. So you end up being quite stressed physically. A lot of guys that we tend to see are anxious, irritable, stressed out, just grumpy. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I always find it interesting. You often see fighters outside the ring or the octagon, and they just jump. A large proportion are remarkably chilled. I think, I don't know, because they're channeling their stress in a certain way, or perhaps they just learn through sequential sort of exposure to quite stressful scenarios how to handle it, but then they do drop back in and they do recover. And I think that balancing of your sort of hormetic, your good stress versus the chronicity of chronic stress that just is not good for any of us, I think is a real driver of so many of the struggles of life on many levels.
100%. I mean, if you look at the decline in testosterone in the Western world, a lot of that's going to be down to, increasing visceral body fat, increasing insulin resistance, but there will be, and environmental, we should probably always mention microplastics, endocrine disrupting chemicals, but there will be a degree of chronic stress in there. I'm sure psychological, basically inappropriate stress, really, stress that isn't appropriate for the situation, in a sense of, it's not there's a lion outside your cave. It's the fact that you've got chronic deadlines and, you're not sleeping well and things like that. Yeah.
Well, that's the modern lions, isn't it? The reality, the email, the text, the WhatsApps, the endless the sirens going, and the interrupted sleep and the light and all of those things are just, it's quite a sort of excess of stress that we take on and take in, that some of which we can't do much about, but I suppose we can buffer ourselves and go to the mental or nutritional gym and build it up that way. But yes, it's a challenge, isn't it?
100%. And it's nice to see, because from someone who's still in the NHS, but you're touting all of the other things, and like we said, with the NHS being so stretched and things, it is difficult to tackle all of that side of it. But it's good to see that from internally you're pushing the message as well, which is brilliant. Yeah. And particularly being in the anaesthetics world, which you always assume to be people who are very sciencey and mathematical, because you have to calculate the dose based on this, or I presume so. I never did much anesthetics, as you can probably tell, but it's not as you would expect, I guess. Yeah.
I have a large inner geek, I think. I think for me as well, I mean, I have loved sport all my life. I think one application I think that's massive is sort of mitochondrial and oxygen utilization. If you deliberately make yourself hypoxic, you massively improve your mitochondrial function and you improve your oxygen utilization. So you look at endurance sports, people are flogging themselves to try and improve their VO2 max, build up their anaerobic threshold. But that takes hours and that takes a lot of time. But the VO2 max is dependent on three things. It's your heart, it's your lungs, but it's also your mitochondrial / your body's ability to utilize that oxygen. And not many people work on it. And there are some people who can have a really good VO2 max, but their actual sort of that side of it isn't good, even in professional athletes. And then if they work on that, they can give themselves that extra 1, 2, 3, 4, 5%, which in high level sports is a massive improvement. Yeah. And you also do that without really stressing the body. It's a positive stress. It's a hormetic stress. It's a good stress. It's a short period. And that, I think, for me, has massive implications. And I suspect in the next few years, sort of breath work and breath coaching, both for emotional resilience, like if you're on the field of play and you get red mist, if you can bring that back within 30 seconds versus getting a red card, that's game changing, and that's outcome changing. And also just being in the optimum part of the stress sort of arousal curve is vital for athletes. And not them do visualization. I just think this is an extra tool that's there and it's available and it's eminently trainable. And I don't quite understand, perhaps it is looked at, but why it isn't looked at more, actually. Certainly in professional sports, you've got these guys and women who are phenomenal people, but it's that Brailsford marginal gains thing. It's there, it's relatively easy, it probably reduces their stress, it does improve their recovery. It's just an extra thing in the armamentarium to make them all round better, impressive people. So yeah, I mean, I think it'll grow, and I think it's being more, it's getting out there. I think you feel like, but again, that might be an echo chamber, but I feel like more people are aware of it. And I do think that it's a real keystone of, if you breathe well throughout the day and your sleep's on point, then the sky's the limit. Off you go. Enjoy your life.
Yeah. Well, that's a good message to end on. I think that's nicely put. Yeah, 100%. 100% agree. Yeah. Well, brilliant. Well, thank you very much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope a lot of people watching and listening have found it useful. I certainly enjoyed the conversation, and maybe when the website's up and running, when the Instagram is full of information, videos, then we can get you back on. Yeah.
I'll send those things through. And yeah, thank you for your time, and thank you for it's good, lovely conversation. Nice to learn some stuff.
Pleasure. Thanks for joining us.
Take care.